Welcome back, everyone. Thanks again for tuning in to Topic UFO tonight. As I stated before, tonight's guest is Sandy Nichols, and he heads up an organization called the Alien Research Group. And not only do they get into the UFO ET thing, but also into other paranormal activity and some other things that we're going to bring up. So this ought to be very interesting. So let's bring him on, shall we? Sandy, are you out there, sir?
I am out here, Rick, and I appreciate the invite.
Well, thanks for agreeing to come on and speak with us today. I'm amazed. I spoke to a lady by the name of Mary Rodwell down in Queensland, Australia, last week that kind of has the same type of organization as the Alien Research Group, as she finds support mechanisms for people that have had contact or abduction type scenarios, So, I mean, before getting into ufology, I just couldn't believe, how much activity is actually going on in the world, From what I understand, your experiences started from an early age. Is that correct?
That's correct. My earliest conscious recollection was over at my grandmother's house in East Nashville, and I was around 5 or 6 at the time. And I'm 62 right now, and these things are still ongoing.
Wow. Well, what can you tell us about this initial contact that you had, or can you tell us about it?
Oh yeah. No problem. Well, I was like I said, I was 5 or 6. I was over at my grandmother's house, and my parents lived over in East Nashville at the time, and so we would go over and, just like any other kids, go over and spend time with the grandmother. And the grandmother lived with her sister and her sister's sister's husband. So they had a small house on Petway Avenue over in East Nashville. And I would play, at that age, you do a lot of make-believe. And so on this particular day, I was doing a make-believe war game. They had a raised up porch in their, off the back of their house that was about 10, 15 feet off the ground. And I was commanding my little make-believe army. And I was the big general. Then, as I was doing this, I saw what I thought at the time was a round airplane. And this round airplane was descending from the sky. And it landed in this, it wasn't a field, it was an undeveloped neighborhood with roads, but had something had happened where the neighborhood never got off the ground, but the roads were in there.
Right.
And the weeds had grown up in all the lots, and this is where it landed. And from my vantage point, I could see it pretty good because I was higher up. And so I thought, well, who's this coming going to fight my battle, another enemy, so to speak. And so I went down the stairs to the backyard, which is a small backyard. And as I was down there, there was 2 strange kids that came out of that undeveloped neighborhood, and they came right through this fence. There was a wire fence line along the property lines. And they didn't come over it. They didn't go through the wire. They came, between the strands. They came right through the wire. And they came and they were floating, and they floated over to me, and they wanted me to go with them. Well, my mother was kind of, she was a great lady, but she was kind of overprotective at times, even back in the 50s. Mm-hmm. And so she had always told me, don't go with strangers. Well, these were strange looking kids. And she also told me not to make fun of strange looking people, And so I thought they were just strange looking bald headed kids and they wanted me to go with them. And I said no at first, but then they said, come on and go. And when they said it the second or third time, I went with them and I just said, okay. And then all three of us floated back across the backyard and then through this fence again. And then into this development, this neighborhood that had not been developed. And when you're down low, you couldn't see this craft. You could not see this craft at all because of the tall weeds and stuff. Mm-hmm. And we got over to the craft, and there was one thing that stood out to me as we were outside this craft, was that the craft itself, the object itself, seemed to be alive.
In what way?
It seemed to be alive. It seemed to be like a living, breathing something.
Wow. And
believe it or not, years later, I was having another abduction experience. One of God knows how many I've had in my lifetime, where these two grays left me in a hallway, and I leaned up against this wall, and all of a sudden this wall started talking to me and told me not to lean on it. And then it immediately reminded me of being 5 or 6 and thinking that this thing was alive, because here I am, an adult, talking to a wall that's alive. And one thing that's kind of strange is that I read an ironic or synchronistic is I read an article coming off the news wires here a couple of weeks ago, where scientists now believe that there can be life on other planets that can be made into solid structures but still be an animal.
Wow.
A creature of some sort. Well, anyway, back to my story there is that I don't know how I got on the craft, but the next thing I know, I'm on the craft and standing in front of this doorway. And as I look in this doorway into this other room, the room is dim, but you can still see in there. It's like low lighting. But the hallway I'm in is very bright. Now, the light in the hallway, for some reason, does not shine in to the room with the low lighting. This bright light stops at the door. It's a manipulation of light of somehow. So they took me into this room, and there was a table in there, and there was all kinds of other kids. There was 30 other kids in there, my age and up to about 10. And we were all they were all playing, what I called playing at the time, with what I called toys. And I was, and for some reason, I knew to go over to this table, because on this table were 3 toys, and I was supposed to play with those toys. Well, the first one was like a ball, a little bit bigger than a softball, and I could take this ball in my hand. And you know what was very strange about it was that I knew what to do with these toys, even though at the time I thought, well, this is the first time I'm seeing them, but I knew what to do with them. So I picked up this ball and I threw it across this room, and this ball went all the way across the other side of the room and stopped before it hit the other wall, and then came back to me and stopped right before it got to my hand and gently floated into my hand.
Whoa.
Now, that was the first toy. The second toy was like the early fiber optics toys that we had that they were selling, that, you know, the fiber optic wand sticking out of the little plastic tube. Yep. That was powered by 2 little batteries.
Right, like a flashlight thing.
Yeah, like a flashlight thing, and you could shake it and you could see the different colors. This was very similar, except for when you shook it, this light that's on the end of the fiber optic lines were actually in the air. So you take it from the left to the right, you would leave you put your toy, you have your toy in the hand and you move it across the sky like that, and it would leave a trail of lights in the air. And then they would gradually dissipate after a couple of seconds. And that reminded me very much of when they came out with the fiber optic toys for kids, you know, human kids and everything. I'm going, man, this looks so similar. But I couldn't. I've even bought one to see if I could get the darn thing to leave a light trail in the air. And I'm going, oh, not with this toy. The third toy. Do you remember when the NASA space program came out, and they were talking about gyroscopes and stuff, and they had this little gyroscope wheel that was red that had two little points on the end of it, like a wheel.
Yep. That
ran along a little wire track that you held in your hand, and you could just go up and down with it, and it would spin.
Yeah, they were called wheelos.
Yeah. Well, this was similar, but without the little wire track.
Okay.
This was like the wheel only. And you could take this object, this wheel, and I could hold it in my hand, and I could literally think about it spinning. And it would start spinning, and then as it was spinning, it stood upright on one of its axes. Then I could get it to fly, and I was flying it around this room. Well, being a little kid, I kind of buzzed a couple of other little kids that were playing with other little toys. And then the next thing I know, this toy, without me even doing anything, was back on the table, and I'm going, uh-oh. And there was instead of being a small, funny-looking kid, now there was a funny-looking adult standing next to me that I had not seen in that room. And he looked at me, and not in the way we're talking, but in this telepathic way. He said, "This is not a toy. This is for you to learn."
Ah.
And I'm going, and years later, I remember those words. Years later, I began to wonder, okay, maybe that's how come I knew what to do with these toys, because I had been there before. It's sort of like the Whitley Strieber secret school type of thing.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you, though, when you said there were all these kids in there, these were all alien kids?
No, these were human kids. They were all kids just like me. And there was like about 25 or 30 of them in this room. And all the kids were separate, doing their own thing, just like I was at this table with these three toys, what I called toys at the time. And then there would be these other kids, and they were doing other things. One I can remember particularly was this one kid over at this wall, and there was a panel there with all these multicolored lights, and he was kind of tapping the lights with his fingers in some kind of a pattern, which I don't know what pattern it was, but it was like all of us were picked up and taken and brought to this room and to play with these toys. Now, according to what the big, tall, strange-looking kid said, or a strange adult, which I know now to be a tall gray, there were toys to us at that age, but apparently they were also things that we were supposed to learn.
Unbelievable. So when did this alien research group, can you quickly kind of tell us about that? Because after that, I want to talk about your latest incident or sighting.
Okay. It was back in 1996. it became almost to a point where I could not deny this stuff was happening. And so for about 6 months, I flirted with going to see a psychologist or a psychiatrist to find out what was with the crazy dreams, because I had gone into big time denial of this stuff. And knowing that they were still going on, but in denial as well, that will drive you crazy, because it's two opposing forces going against you. Mm-hmm. So I finally went to see a psychiatrist. I talked to her about the fourth session with her. I asked her for some regressive hypnosis, and people better, if they do that, they better be prepared for it, because it's not a happy experience at first. Because once they open that door, all these memories are trying to get out of the door. Mm-hmm. So this went on, and I had to deal with all this new information coming in, and then I was having flashbacks, the whole 9 yards. Then one night, I'm out on my back porch over in Brentwood at the house over there, different from where I live now, and I'm smoking a cigarette, and then all of a sudden something hit me that said, start up a group. And it was to help people. And was the main function that I started up ARG, is to help people, because people had helped me. I began to network. I got my first computer in 96, and I met other people online, and they were having similar experiences, so that helped me. And then I said, let me make this like a network to where people can contact me, and I will try to find them the help as such that I went through. And that's how ARG got started. And then as a abduction support network, and then these other aspects of the paranormal came in, to where it's weird. People who have straight ghost experiences usually are not abductees, but a good number of abductees have ghost-like experiences, ghost experiences. So it's sort of like they're all interrelated.
Now, do you think that's because there's some type of possible interdimensional thing going on, or?
Well, I think it's a combination of things. Interdimensional. See, I'm a firm believer that these aliens, let me put it this way, I'm a firm believer. I hadn't written it down in stone, but my evidence is showing that these beings are coming from other planets. I know there's other people who say they're interdimensional. Some say they're devils, demons, and that's fine for whatever somebody wants to believe. Now, I think that the people who have like ghost experiences, but who are also abductees, I think the reason the ghosts are attracted to them is because of the energy level. There's got to be something about us abductees that makes the aliens, whoever they are, come and get us to do what they do to us. And so if part of that is our high energy, then ghosts are attracted to us as well, because I mean, it's just like when we do ghost investigations, we have to take out batteries. We have to take extra batteries, because the ghosts and spirits will actually drain our batteries. Mm-hmm. And so if they can use us. So when you do ghost investigations or any type of investigations I do, I have to kind of put a block around myself of white light so that I don't get drained so much.
I know that your group does paranormal investigations, also things like Bigfoot and ghosts and all of that. But you have recently seen something that is truly, truly bizarre. And I believe you refer to it as Stick Man. Can you tell us about Stick Man?
Well, there's a legend up in the Washington State area from the Indians about a creature they known as Stick Man that is, and the reason it's called a Stick Man because it looks like a stick. It is rail thin, but with a bigger head. That you look and you wonder how the head, being bigger, can fit on such a skinny frame. And back during the fall, well, actually late summer of last year, I was waiting on some friends to come over, and it was right at dusk, and I saw this creature that came out of this vacant lot, up the vacant lot, the next one up from me, going up the street, and this creature literally walked across this road in like 2 steps, and we're talking about a normal width road, and it looked just like a stick. The arms were like stick, but they were jointed. The legs were jointed and looked like sticks. The body itself looked like a stick. And on this first sighting, it was actually glowing. It was kind of like almost like a neon colored fish type of glow. And the head was similar in shape, not exactly, but similar in shape to the ones in that movie, Indiana Jones movie, Crystal Skull. Mm-hmm. And then it walked across the street. Now, there was an incident that happened when my friends were leaving that my dogs, I've got 2 black labs, and they're just as friendly as the dickens. And there was something out in the yard that night, about 11 o'clock that night, that my dogs were literally protecting one of the people that came over to my house from something that we couldn't see. And actually, my dog got down into his back end up, his front end down, growling, barking at the same time, and never heard that dog do that before. And they chased something in the yard, so I can only imagine that it would probably that same thing I saw earlier in the evening.
Now,
the second time, pardon?
Does a stick man, you said he has a big head, or it has a big head. Did you see any facial features at all?
No, I saw what would be considered eyes, or it's like looking at a skull sideways almost.
Okay.
Because I've never seen him come in straight for me, always to the side. And if you look at a skull sideways, you only get half the facial features. Mm-hmm. And so I can't tell you how big the mouth was, how big the nose was, how the ears. If they were there, they were small. The eyes seemed big, though. The eyes seemed big, and but even though the trunk of the body was glowing these different colors, the rest of the arms and the legs were black. Even the head was black. Then earlier it was in fall, late fall. I was coming down Arnold Road, and I had to slow down for this car to turn into this driveway. And this thing ran out of this open field right in front of my car, and my high beams hit it head on. I mean, just was illuminated this thing head on. And this creature, it's over 7 feet tall. It may be close to 8 feet tall, and it's got a stride on it that's close to 10 to 15 feet. And I mean a long stride. And it ran straight across in front of my car, not more than 50 feet in front of my car, from this field or this vacant lot, and this other area of I live in, near where I live, about 5 miles away. Ran across the road in front of my car with the brights on, and ran down along this fence line up toward this house that's set up off the road, about 100 yards or so. Then, here a couple of weeks ago, I'd say about a month ago, 4 to 5 weeks ago, I'm sitting in my hot tub about 3 o'clock in the morning just to kind of chill out after I've done some research and stuff. And I saw the same creature, but this time he was not on the ground. He was actually floating. and the top of his head was about several inches above the gutter line, and just floated. It actually floated in my. I saw him for about a good 5-6 seconds as he floated across my part of my side yard and behind my office pool house.
Unbelievable. Well,
Yeah.
I tell you, Sandy, unfortunately, we are just dead out of time, but I definitely would like to have you back on and talk some more about this Stick Man and Mothman and some of this other paranormal stuff that you're involved in. Now, I take it people can reach you through your website, alienresearchgroup.com, correct?
That's correct.
All right. And so if they have any inkling that they may be a contactee or have been abducted, or they're not sure they have, they could reach out to you, and either you or somebody you could refer them to could help them, huh?
Absolutely, and they could tell me UFO sightings or ghost sightings or anything like that.
All right, very good. Well, Sandy, thanks so much. I appreciate you taking the time speaking with us. You obviously have a lot more that we could talk about, so we'll have to have you back on for a second go around.
Well, Rick, I appreciate the invite, and it's been my pleasure. Always happy to share with people.
All right, Sandy. Well, you have a good evening, and we'll be staying in touch.
Okay, thank you, Rick.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Open the door, you'll find the secret. To find the answer is to keep it. You'll believe it when you find something screaming across your mind. Green slime.
Research group. And not only do they get into the UFO ET thing, but also into other paranormal activity and some other things that we're going to bring up. So this ought to be very interesting. So let's bring him on, shall we? Sandy, are you out there, sir?
I am out here, Rick, and I appreciate the invite.
Well, thanks for agreeing to come on and speak with us today. I'm amazed. I spoke to a lady by the name of Mary Rodwell down in Queensland, Australia, last week that kind of has the same type of organization as the Alien Research Group, as she finds support mechanisms for people that have had contact or abduction type scenarios, So, I mean, before getting into ufology, I just couldn't believe, how much activity is actually going on in the world, From what I understand, your experiences started from an early age. Is that correct?
That's correct. My earliest conscious recollection was over.
Welcome back, everyone. Thanks again for tuning in to Topic UFO tonight. As I stated before, tonight's guest is Sandy Nichols, and he heads up an organization called the Alien Research.
Her sister and her sister's sister's husband. So they had a small house on Petway Avenue over in East Nashville. And I would play, at that age, you do a lot of make-believe. And so on this particular day, I was doing a make-believe war game. They had a raised up porch in their off the back of their house that was about 10, 15 feet off the ground, and I was commanding my little make-believe army, and I was the big general. Then, as I was doing this, I saw what I thought at the time was a round airplane. And this round, my grandmother's house in East Nashville, and I was around 5 or 6 at the time. And I'm 62 right now, and these things are still ongoing.
Wow. Well, what can you tell us about this initial contact that you had, or can you tell us about it?
Oh yeah. No problem. Well, I was like I said, I was 5 or 6. I was over at my grandmother's house, and we lived. My parents lived over in East Nashville at the time, and so we would go over and, just like any other kids, go over and spend time with the grandmother, and the grandmother lived with